This.
Jane drew the short straw for this assignment, obviously.
I drew the longest. All right, we are live. Hi, everybody. Welcome to A Mighty Blaze Celebrity Conversations. We're all doing queen waves today. I am your host, Jane Roper, and I am thrilled to be here today with the one and only Jenna Blum, who also happens to be one of the co-founders of A Mighty Blaze, and author Stephen P. Kiernan. So I will give who is looking just incredibly dashing today. I mean, I don't know about you, but I think this look is really working for him, and I think it's a keeper. So I'm going to briefly introduce those two to you, and then I'm going to let them go nuts, chat with each other. These two apparently go way back, so things could get kind of kooky today. I've been told there's supposed to be lots of sass, and I don't know. There will be sass. So, Jenna Blum. Jenna Blum is the New York Times and internationally best-selling author of the novels Those Who Save Us, which has been translated into approximately 12,000 languages, The Storm Chasers, and her most recent novel, The Lost Family. Lost Family was an indie next pick, which the Boston Globe called wrenching and chilling, poignant and undeniably compelling, and People magazine called an exquisite page turner. And having read it, I would concur. It is absolutely a page turner. It's awesome. Stephen Kiernan. As a journalist and novelist, Stephen P. Kiernan has published nearly 4 million words. How did you figure that out?
It's actually closer to 5 million now. Okay. You know, I wrote something, for 14 years, I wrote 365 editorials a year at, 800 words a piece. So just that is about 5 million. Okay. And then, 1 million in books and like that.
So you were being modest. Okay. So his newspaper work garnered more than 40 awards, including the George Polk Award and the Scripps Howard Award for Distinguished Service to the First Amendment. He is the author of the novels The Curiosity, which is now in television series development, The Baker's Secret, a regional indie bestseller, The Hummingbird. He has also written, and The Hummingbird. He has also written 2 nonfiction books, Last Rites and Authentic Patriotism. Stephen's newest novel, Universe of Two, which we will be hearing about today, was published in May, a love story set in 1944 amid the development of the atomic bomb. This novel tells the story of Charlie Fish, a young math whiz ordered to build an essential component of the bomb, and his sweetheart, Brenda. The New York Times bestselling author Beatrice Williams says, rarely does historical fiction get everything so right as Universe of Two. Compelling characters, faithful detail, a story packed with unexpected twists, and a sure, authentic voice that never wavers. Awesome. I'm really excited to hear you guys chat. So Jenna, take it away.
Thank you, Jane.
I shall. Thank you, Jane. And Jane is our princess of sass on the Blaze, and she is an author herself of a memoir, as we say, on the Blaze, and a novel, and has another novel forthcoming that I'm really, really excited about. So she's not just a hot on-air celebrity host, just for all of y'all who think she's just a hottie. She has the brain. She has the writer brain. So Stephen obviously has the biggest glasses, and he has something to prove with the glasses here today. Are you going to keep those on the whole time?
No, I just needed, it was so bright when you were first on, Jenna. I needed to shield my eyes, and Jane's smile. I just needed to protect myself.
Sass is starting already. I understand. Okay, so yeah, so I'm gonna dish some behind the scenes here. I promised Stephen that I would behave myself, sort of. But I will say that he parachuted into my life via Facebook Messenger, writing me a love letter about The Lost Family at one point, right after it had first come out. Not only just saying like, hey, Jenna, I really admire this book as a fellow writer, but citing whole passages that he liked and why he liked them. And it was about 3 pages long. It was very detailed. And there's nothing more wonderful for a writer to read than this very in-depth appreciation of something that she's put her heart and soul into. So I thought, who does this? Like, who even does this? Who takes time out of his life to analyze somebody's book in addition to reading it and then kindly write to that person about it and take this leap of faith to a writer who's essentially a stranger. Stephen does. And so that's the kind of generosity that drew us together. And we have been friends ever since, of course, because I'm friends with anybody who's going to be like, Jenna, I love your book. I'm like, really? I'm your new best friend now. So Stephen, I've been your new best friend for like 2 years. You're never getting rid of me. Just keep feeding me those writer tidbits of approbation, and I'm very happy.
You know, I only write like one of those a week, you know. No.
Oh, you told me it was
No.
once a year. Why?
No, it's very rare. I have to really love a book. If it's somebody like, you know, the thing is, you know that writers, if you're fortunate, will hear from readers, and you may get a few words, maybe even a few sentences, and sometimes someone will go that little bit further and say, here's why your book touched me, or here's how it got my heart. And so if I find a book that kind of wrecks me, then I will do it. And you know, a couple of times the author has not replied, but I have become friends with a couple of people also, because I did just say, you know, not just, hey, I liked your book and it was really smart, but hey, you did this really well, and this, I can't figure out how you did it, but it nailed me, and this character surprised me, just to take 15 minutes. And so you know, I thought your book was that good. And there's one scene in there that I still think is unbelievable, where this man takes this woman up to look at a beautiful view, and she doesn't know what to do with herself, and he just says, you don't have to do anything, just all you have to do is be. Just sit here and be. And it was so difficult for her character to do that, to not have something she needed to accomplish, or to something to say, or something to just be. And it was one of those like transcendent fictional moments. And it's like, I am writing this woman. This is so good. And that way I don't have to sit and be myself. I can just have the character do it for me. And no, you know, that's like what if a novel, you know, when it transcends.
It's so nice. It's so, I mean, like, seriously, I'm like, so there's nothing better a writer can hear. If you ever want to like seduce a writer into friendship, all you have to do is write the things that you loved about that writer's work. I mean, I can't imagine not responding to that kind of letter from a reader, from a fellow author, from any reader. It did take me about a week to respond to Stephen's letter, because I was like, I can't believe how in-depth this was. I know this man is a writer. I had read The Baker's Secret, greatly admired it. We both write about World War II. We both wrote about resistance, in that Stephen wrote about resistance in France in The Baker's Secret, and I had written about resistance in Germany and Those Who Save Us. So of course, Stephen was on my radar, but I was like, what novelist takes time out of his life to extend that kind of kindness? So I was really just so flabbergasted that I read his letter and like slammed my laptop and like went and had a big old glass of wine, and then came back like a week later and said, thank you so much for doing that. So readers, if you have writers you admire, we are so permeable these days. We're on Twitter, on Facebook, on Messenger, on email, websites. Like, please write to us. It honestly means the world to hear what lines people liked. And also, Stephen, you wrote to me in the opening paragraph that I write like a boxer, which is so great. Like, I'm like luring people in with, you know, little jabs of description, and then boom, the round out punch. So I was so inspired by this that I actually started taking boxing lessons later in the friendship. It was
pretty much how I think of you, you know, mouth guard, you know. Yeah.
I'm always going for the TKO, you know, it's like they're lipstick, but they also are like gloves. Now I know how to do this. So it's great. Very inspiring on many levels. I also should say, I'm going to dish all the dish, that without Stephen, there would be no Mighty Blaze, because Stephen's book, Universe of Two, which I'm going to hold up and game show hostess on you as much as I possibly can, I had the joy of reading in galley, or actually, I think it was pre-galley, like it was manuscript form, and you have like a manuscript box of pages that comes to your house, like this box that's behind me on the mantle, which is my own box. But Stephen sent me this box of paper that was his new book, which is a very big gesture of trust on the part of any writer. And I still remember, you know, you guys know how when you read something you really love, you remember where you were when you read it. It was winter. I was up in my sleeping loft in Boston. I was reading the book, and like knowing the person who writes the book is always a little weird, because you feel like you're in one of their dreams. You can hear their voice, but the book is a thing distinct from the author. So it's like an act of great ventriloquism. And I was reading, you know, the pages in bed and just devouring them and being so wrapped in this dream that Stephen was having of Brenda and Charlie, who are sweethearts during World War II. And Charlie is developing, unbeknownst to him, the trigger for the atom bomb. And it was such an immersive, incredible read. And then Stephen's book was in the process of being alchemized into a book from that pile of pages, and COVID. And he and I had talked at great length about his tour. Like, we were going to do planned actual in real life events together where we had staged all sorts of drama for everybody. We were going to have fake fights and slap each other around the stage and kiss and make up and do this whole thing. And Stephen calls his tour the Tunnel of Hugs, right? Like, we write books so that we can meet you, the readers, and get hugs and come out of our hidey holes and be like, oh my God, there are actual people here. Thank you for doing this. But COVID was going to extinguish that. And I just thought, no effing way. No, like, I know how hard he's worked on this book. I know how good it is. I know how hard all of my friends work on their books, like Caroline Levitt and Leslie Bloom and Jen DeLeon, all the people out this week. I'll be goddamned if I just let the books fall down the well into obscurity. So we had this phone conversation, and I said, I'm going to throw up a Facebook page so all the writers can introduce their books. And I think you suggested the title Mighty Blaze, like, people want to know, where this came from. So do you want to elucidate on that a little bit?
Well, I mean, it's exactly right. I worked, normally my books come out on about a 20-month cycle. It's about how long it takes me. And this one is 40. And it was just much, much harder to book, and it required much, much more solitude. And I always love the tour because it is, yes, the Tunnel of 1,000 Hugs, but also it's just like, it's such an antidote for the thousands of hours alone. And so that was sort of what was in my mind, and ambition and hope. And yeah, a couple events with Jenna, which I knew would be really fun. And we had agreed to argue at the Newburyport Book Festival, Literary Festival. We had a planned, like, what we were going to fight about, and maybe she would slap me. Like, we were going to make it a good panel,
Maybe. I mean, Stephen was going to mansplain endlessly to me, which you still may do on, on this call, but I can't.
We'll see. But anyway, and then, of course, COVID just torpedoed the tour completely, and the book got delayed by 3 months, which I was glad about. And I put together another tour thinking we'd be able to do it. And then, of course, we weren't ready then too. And by then, Mighty Blaze was going strong, and it's so fantastic to be able to, on Tuesday, my book came out in a lot of places, and the first thing that I saw when I got on Twitter was that it was recognized by Mighty Blaze as one of the books coming out 2 days ago. And that is how we find readers is the challenge, right? They're there and they're looking for stories, and how we line up with each other. There's some alchemy there, there's some mystery there. But the tour usually helps, and some festivals help. And when that's not occurring, here is the Mighty Blaze, and it's mighty. It's mighty now, and it's only 3 months old. And it is really helping readers and writers to find each other. And I'm delighted and honored to be part of today, and just to be part of that whole panoply of things that are happening, so that readers and writers can find each other in a time when we kind of need one another a little more than usual.
Yeah. And I remember having this conversation with you at the beginning of COVID when I was freaking out in my apartment. We spoke on the phone, and I was saying, I feel like the lights are going out all over Europe, like the famous Churchill saying at the beginning of World War II, since, this is what we talk about, World War II. And when you're a World War II novelist, everything fits in that basket. So I was getting sort of dismal and Churchillian about it. And I said, well, maybe if I put a whole bunch of books together, they can make a blaze. That will light the way for readers to come and find us. And Stephen has 2 sons who are these incredible young men, and he calls them the mighty boys, the mighty men. And that was in my head, and I said, maybe we can make a Mighty Blaze. And that's where the name Mighty Blaze came from. And I reached out to Caroline Levitt, whose book, With or Without You, is out this week. Also, people buy it. And joined forces, and it went on from there. Oh my gosh, yes, I have it too. Wait, I'm going to hold up my book.
No, I love her more. Forget it.
No, yeah, well, I love
this.
All right, Stephen wins. Stephen put it up first, so he wins here.
1-0.
1-0. Fight.
Right, you just want us to get pugilistic. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. So it's not as fun if you can't hug and make up, right?
That's true.
But anyway, so this whole endeavor came about partly because Stephen kindly encouraged me at a time when I was feeling quite dismal, but also not willing to relinquish that reader-writer connection. And I'm so grateful that everybody who's watching and everybody who's participating has helped us bring this to fruition, so we can introduce finally Universe of Two, which is what we're actually here to talk about today. So Stephen, I have many questions.
Okay.
But first, would you please introduce the novel to all the readers who are watching, like in your own words? Give us
You bet. You bet. So the story begins with Brenda. Brenda is a smart, sassy 19-year-old Chicago gal. It's 1944. She's a great keyboardist, pianist, and organist who got into the Oberlin Conservatory, but can't go because of the war, basically, and because the family can't afford to educate her and her brother. And so she's working in the family organ store and in the Hyde Park section of Chicago, and feeling pretty superior to all the customers and dating a lot of soldiers. And one day this geeky little guy comes into the store, and that's Charlie. And Charlie he just was in a choir in high school and a choir in college, and he just wants to hear some organ music. And she starts playing, and what she doesn't know is, for all her sassiness and brassiness, that when she plays the organ, she's beautiful. And her face calms, and he actually asks her to play slow songs all the time because she gets a contemplative look on her face that's really attractive to him. And it's especially so because she doesn't know. And so there's a romance that begins. And meanwhile, he's doing what he calls math for the government. He's doing math. There's a whole bunch of boys in this building at the University of Chicago that are doing math. How do you feed a battalion in the field? How do you get fuel to a flotilla? All kinds of things. And he's working on this one specialized kind of esoteric math that he's good at. And he's good enough at it that they offer him a big promotion down to Los Alamos, New Mexico. And so he goes down there, and turns out he's going to be working on this big project. They call it Project Y. And it takes him a couple of months before he finds out that what he's doing is building the device that will be the detonator for the atomic bomb. And he has all kinds of moral qualms about doing that. He's just a choir boy. He's just a good kid who's good at math. He's 19 years old, and so, but every time he hesitates, he'll talk to Brenda about it, but for security reasons, she's not allowed to know what he's doing. So she just says, soldier up, buddy. My brother's in Europe. My best friend's husband's about to do the invasion of Japan. They think 1 million soldiers are going to die there. Man up, be a man. And so he does his job, and the bomb does its job. And he feels after the war a huge weight of responsibility and even of guilt about his part in it. What he says is the best machine gunner maybe killed 200 people in the war. The best fighter pilot, maybe he killed 50 people in the war. Charlie feels like he participated in killing 250,000 people, just a whole different scale. And when Brenda, likewise, realizes what she was urging him to do, she also feels culpable. And so together, they set out seeking redemption and using their love for one another as the glue to help them find it. And whether they find it or not is something you have to read to the last sentence to find out.
You got to buy the book, as they say.
Buy the book. Or go to a bookstore and just read the last sentence,
You can't go to a bookstore anymore, so you got to buy the book.
Yeah. It won't really work. It won't work out of context.
Yeah, buy it from Bookshop if you're going to buy it, people. So just an incredibly rich story. And when I provided a quote for the book's cover, my quote is, I need my glasses, the most tender, terrifying, relevant book you'll read this year, which I still stand by. I also said in my quote that you had achieved the nearly impossible, which I think is to take a story that's essentially a war story, about a World War II story, and entwine it with a love story. So braided together within Universe of Two is the love story of Charlie and Brenda, and then this high moral questioning of what is culpability, and especially what is culpability in wartime, and very science geeky stuff that I think is still very accessible to every reader. But as a science geek, I loved it. A lot of material about how the trigger mechanism for the atomic bomb was designed and what happened when the bomb went off, the test bombs went off, vaporizing the sand at Los Alamos to glass, green glass. I have not forgotten that. So incredible stuff. And somehow it's all wrapped in this very digestible, very, very reader-friendly package. So you said, okay, I see you want to say something. Fine, I'll just sit back and let you mansplain at me. That's fine, Stephen. Do it. Go
I was
ahead.
just say, is it cold in here now? I was going to say
No,
that
it's hot, Stephen.
the challenge was that I gave myself was that I had to learn a whole one-to-one. You think she got one of there? Okay. So was that, I'd probably read 3,000 pages just about how the bomb works and what its components are, and that I wanted to have the description of how the bomb works in one page. And I needed all those other pages, some of which I completely did not understand, so that I could have that one page that would just say to the reader, here's why Charlie's role is very, very complicated. At one point he says to Brenda, when he can't tell what he's doing, he says, it's like a tiny part, but it's an essential part. Think of a bus, and what I'm making is the steering wheel. And so I'm trying, I hope it's not like sciencey where you got to be into science to read this. It's really more like just to understand his predicament and what's going on in his conscience while he's making this complicated device that is the trigger for the big boom.
I'm going to ask you some writer sausage making questions.
Okay.
One of them is, because you have these elements in the book, it's told from 2 points of view. One is Brenda's and one is Charlie's. Yeah. Brenda's is first person, Charlie's is third. Yeah. And when you were writing Charlie's sections, it is science heavy. And yet, as I said, I found it eminently accessible. Was that tough to do? Was that a challenge?
Sometimes, because I think you can only explain something in simpler terms if you understand it. And if you don't understand it, you can't really boil it down. And so that required more work on my part. Also, it had to be in service of the story. If I learned something, like I learned a million really cool things that are not about the bomb and about the research that are not in this novel because they didn't serve the story. And in fact, in the first draft, I put a lot of them in there because I just didn't know if I'd need them, or it was really about putting the story first. I took 50,000 words out of this in revision. It was an enormously large book, and that's almost the length of one of my other novels. My shortest one I think is like 80,000. It was like putting it in, but being willing to slice it out. And it was really not wanting very much not to be boring, because I think that you get 3 consecutive sentences of nuclear physics and you've lost a lot of readers. You can, it's really like one nibble at a time.
That's like the Elmore Leonard quote that I have on my wall when I'm working with. His advice is to leave out the boring parts. That's all you have to do as the writer, just leave out the boring parts. So, but yeah. I do think, and tell me if you think this is true also, one of our dear readers and viewers and fans who is on many of these discussions, Barbara March. Hi, Barbara. Thank you. She wants to know about your research process, and that I'm sort of leading to that with this question, which is, when I do all my research, I love to do the research for historical fiction. It's a way of armchair travel, but it's also a sort of a time machine. And some of the details are so cool that I want to try and shoehorn them in, especially in those early drafts, which I call the "as you know, Bob" drafts, when all the characters saying to the other characters, like, "As you know, Bob, the way that nuclear fission is created is blah, blah, blah." And you're like, yeah, and everybody's going to think that's natural. I'm just going to leave that in there. But of course, you have to go back and sculpt and scoop away a lot of the cool stuff that you have learned. Do you find that painful?
To take the stuff out?
Yeah, to take
this book, it was easier. There was such a wealth of material, and the book was too long, that if I had a scene that had technology in it that was being explained and the scene didn't work, like normally if I have a scene that doesn't work in a novel, I just work it and work it and work it and work it. And with this one, I just took the scene out, just gone. If this scene isn't working, there's no time for that. Because I wanted it to be, I wanted a certain density to the story. You're asking about those 2 different voices. The way I refer to it is one of those voices had a security clearance. It could go inside the Manhattan Project. It could go inside the barbed wire fence in Los Alamos and see what was going on. Well, there's like Charlie's been there for 6 months working on explosive stuff. And when we meet him, it's the morning before they're going to do the first detonation with a device that he's built. Just skip the 6 months. We'll find out about that. The other thing is that there's a certain kind of thing, I worked in newspapers for 20 years, so I love to dig. But what I'm looking for is not a scientific fact, hardly ever. A fact is almost useless. It's much more about a human experience. So for example, Los Alamos, arguably the greatest collection of scientific minds in one place ever in human history. You got a dozen Nobel Prize winners. You got department chairs of physics and chemistry and metallurgy all over the country, right? All these brilliant people there, and the milk was always sour, right? Like they couldn't figure out refrigeration. No matter what they did, the milk would be flying when they left Santa Fe. And by the time guys would get it, they'd be like, hey, this milk came in last night. They get a glass of it, take one sip. Oh, and it just humanized the place for me, right? That they couldn't get. That to me was more valuable than anything I learned about beryllium and its neutron bombardment capacity, right? It was like, what's it like to live there? And so those are like little jewels, and you have to read all this science to find the milk was sour. That is so great, because we all know what the experience is of drinking sour milk or smelling sour milk. That's, it's human. And does that answer the question? So it's not hard. Like, I will keep the milk. I will fight for the sour milk, but I'll let the beryllium go in a heartbeat.
Yeah, that totally makes sense to me. And I think I have, more geeky writer research questions. I know we wanted to know about your research for the novel. But yes, it does, those moments where you find something that is the intersection between character and history, I think are what make historical fiction permeable for readers, so that you're not talking at them about beryllium. And at the same time, I feel as though that research that we do 3 years worth of research, it becomes a paragraph in the novel, right? Yes. But I feel that readers, you can correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I think that they give the novel its weight of authority, that it's like the tip of the iceberg is what the reader sees in terms of our research, but the weight of that iceberg can still be felt underwater, and they give it, the work, its gravitas and its weight. Otherwise, like, people can tell when you're making shit up, is the shorter way to say that. Can you tell us a little bit about the research you did for this? Did you go to Los Alamos? Did you
Absolutely.
also become a woman at some point to write Brenda? This is what we want to know.
I'm sorry, I missed the second part.
Did you become a woman at some point to write Brenda?
I didn't, but I did. But she is an organist, and I did spend a lot of time learning about organs. The most interesting of which was that I connected with a guy named Emery Fanning, who's retired now. I think he's in his 80s, but he was for many, many years the director of the choir and player of the organ at Middlebury College, which is about a half an hour away. And he taught me a lot about the organ. And organists are an interesting type. And there was one time where I was actually inside the pipes, and he was showing me how the organ gets loud. And without going into too much, I'll just say that he turned up the volume, and I went, whoa! And I could hear him laughing up at the keyboard in the chapel. Like, he was just being a mad scientist about it. I did go to Los Alamos, and it was really valuable to get a sense of New Mexico and that part of New Mexico and how it was up on the hill above it. But in terms of the research that I did, it was nearly worthless. And the reason that it was is that the Department of Energy is not chatty about what it does and what it has done. They actually employ 2 historians full-time there. Both of them were willing to confirm. There's one character I was doing research on, and they said, yes, he was here. He was in the detonator division. How long was he here? Can't tell you. Where did he live? Can't tell you. Did he have a title? Can't tell you. I mean, they're historians who didn't want to share the history. So I got to see the landscape, and that was very helpful because, of course, my characters lived in that landscape for a while. But what it told me actually was this. If you go to Pearl Harbor, you can go out in that white building, the historic memorial building there, and right in front of you in the water, there is the USS Arizona sitting on the bottom. You can go to Gettysburg and get just a little pamphlet, and it'll say, here's how many boys from Pennsylvania died during Pickett's charge on this hill. You go to Los Alamos, and that stuff is scrubbed. It is not there. Just like they took away all the radioactive soil, they took away the history. And so what that told me was that there is a kind of ambivalence that exists about what the atomic weapon does. Look, today is the anniversary of Hiroshima. They're marketing that day. They're celebrating or marking or honoring that day in Hiroshima, where there's an enormous memorial. Where is our memorial to the Manhattan Project, to the bomb and what it accomplished? We have one to, all kinds of things that happen in wars, but there is this, so that actually, the fact that I couldn't get great stuff there was still instructive to me, was still informative. And I had to do more of it through reading, through research, through being inside an organ when somebody played it loud. Sometimes even what you miss, what you can't be told, is important data.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I think about when I first went to Germany in '93, how when we went to Buchenwald at that point, it was not a museum. It was not memorialized. The Russians had just left. And so it was just a sort of a scar, like a wound on a hill with barbed wire around it. The crematoria was still standing, but all of the barracks had been razed and all there were rocks. And I went back in 2017 with this fantastic outfit called Adventures by the Book, which takes readers into the settings of their favorite books. So we were visiting all the settings in my first book. And there was a fantastic museum there with very sensitive, well-trained guides who took us around and showed us everything and let us sieve some of the dirt at Buchenwald, where they're still finding prisoners' belongings. And I think about that 24-year period between '93 and 2017, when Germany, a country that had been primarily responsible for the Holocaust, for the Second World War, an aggressor country, had grappled with its conscience. And now there are edifices everywhere to the past, erected to the past, where when I first went there, the Nuremberg racetrack, where Hitler had held all of his enormous rallies, it was literally a racetrack where like people raced their cars, and there were big Coca-Cola signs everywhere. Now, again, there's an amazing museum. I think that what you're speaking to, Stephen, is America is a country that has not adequately grappled with its aggressor past. There's no memorial there until this year to slavery, the fact that we perpetuated these atrocities. Like, where is our memorial to the genocide against Native Americans? Like, where is our memorial to Hiroshima? Of course we don't have one. We're the aggressor. It doesn't fit well into the narrative of we do everything awesomely. We ride in on the Charger and save all the other countries. So I'm with you in that. Did the 75th anniversary of the bomb, just today, factor into the timing of the release of the novel?
It did, but it didn't in terms of when I started. I didn't know it was going to take me 3 years and change to write this book. And so I thought it was going to be out way before. I thought it'd be out for like the 73rd anniversary. But it turned out that, yes, by the time I did all the revision and all the research that required, it lined up. So then it was a matter of holding it for a little while. I actually sent a finished book to my editor in November of 18. So it's been a long process to get to here, but I think that it's because of what you just said about how we don't reflect on our less than ideal moments, and this on our conscience, on our national conscience. And this is a novel about the consciences of this couple in love, and they're both really struggling. And at the end of the war, they don't feel like they were their best selves, and they sort of have each other to recover from that. And I think, like, not to be facile about it, but I feel like, we could look at some darker parts of our history if we were standing together. We're not, as a country, standing together now, not by a long shot. But I think that may make this book more poignant for people to think about. There's a couple of scenes where there are 3 young men who work on the Manhattan Project in different divisions, and one is kind of erudite, and one's this chemist from Kentucky who speaks kind of corn pone, but he's actually brilliant. And the other is Charlie. And the way that they sort out their role in the war is they sit next to a campfire and drink whiskey and talk about it. Can you imagine Americans who disagree sitting around a campfire and passing a bottle of whiskey around and conversing about it now? No, it's not the kind of country we are. And so I think that that's an important part of the book. I didn't know that was going to be the context that comes out. And it was just to say, here's how these guys dealt with it. And when one guy resigns from Manhattan Project, the other guys are like, well, here's to him. We'll drink to him. There was, we can in fact learn from the past. And there are ways that it can instruct us. in how to deal with even the most difficult things. We have a beautiful, poignant memorial to the Vietnam War for all the conflict about that. We have a gorgeous, heartbreaking memorial at Ground Zero in Manhattan, just right around the corner from my publisher's office. So I see it every time I go. We have a heartbreaking memorial in Oklahoma City, where a former soldier did a terrible thing and blew up a federal building and killed a lot of people, including a mess of kids. If we can memorialize those things, can we not think about, like, not saying the bomb was wrong or right, just saying we killed 250,000 people. Here's where the people did that work that made that happen. And it takes a kind of solemnity. If I were a sculptor, I believe me, I'd have like a million suggestions. I don't. I just feel like we could look at that. It wouldn't hurt us any. And if we sat around a campfire and had a conversation about it, maybe that's what we're doing right now. I don't know, but I feel like it would be medicinal for us a little bit.
It would be nice if we could, as a country, do that right now, red and blue, right? The red and blue states. And as we have been divided and as we have been so labeled, it would be good if we could sit around a campfire with whiskey and seek out commonalities as opposed to the differences that have been so amplified. I think it actually is very important for a country to look at the wounds that it inflicted as well as the wounds that it sustained, because all of the memorials you're talking about are wounds that we have sustained, but not the ones we inflicted, but those cause damage as well. And if they're left untended, they fester. So if you're not taking your own history as an aggressor into consideration, how are you ever going to have any sort of peaceful moral conscience in a country? Do you think Americans right now are capable of sitting around a campfire?
It's how I've been socializing for the last 4 months. I have a little campfire in my side yard. I can't say I put it there. My sons did. My sons were roommates in New York City, and they came home just before it got really crazy down there. And we have 4 Adirondack chairs that are 7 feet apart in a circle around this little, very basic campfire. And that's how we've been talking with each other to understand what's happening here. And it's the topic. There are 3 topics of conversation, right? I mean, one of them is this virus that that has taken 160,000 lives, and that didn't need to happen. South Korea has 1/6 of our population, and they had lost 300 people. Okay, we could have done way better. Then you have the economic catastrophe that is a result of that's going to take us a long time to rebuild from. And then you have the undeniable revelation of racial violence, and particularly among the police forces and the law and order forces that we have entrusted. And we've been hearing about it forever, but now we see the videos. It's just irrefutable. And the way that we are doing it, and not all our friends agree, is we're sitting around a campfire. We don't drink whiskey. I don't anyway. But we're trying to sort it out. And my guess is that that's actually a way better way to sort it out. If you look at where we are with racial injustice, I think the culture now has moved. It has really moved. And I think that there are other people besides people of color that we're now realizing, geez, we have not been listening enough to them. I haven't paid much attention to the trans community and what its issues are and what its demands are. And now I just think, like, we're not gonna tell anybody to shut up anymore. We're just not, And I feel like the culture is moving fast, and I feel like the corporate world is hustling to catch up, and I feel like the government has got cement shoes. And I guess that's what elections are for. And I don't even feel like that's a liberal or conservative point of view. Maybe in certain parts of the country it would seem that way. It's more like we're in a time of reckoning, and we have been found wanting. And if I can for 1 second more, every one of us has at some time in our life harmed another person, emotionally or whatever. We have, just by a mistake. We know, like, if I say that out loud, I know an instant moment comes to mind, and that I'm ashamed of when I was 18, came to mind, just, and the question is like, how do we atone? How do we find redemption? And that's the question that Charlie and Brenda face in this book, right? Is they participated in something that may have been necessary, but was an unprecedented savagery. How are they going to live with that? Are they going to be alcoholics? Are they going to be deniers of their own experience, or are they going to try and heal themselves and other people? And it turns out that what they set out to do, for lack of a non-highfalutin word, what they try to do is sacred. What they try to accomplish together is sacred. And this is why I didn't write a book for the 75th anniversary or for COVID or for any of that. But as you know, Jenna, the thrill of writing history is how pertinent it can be to where we live today, right now, this minute.
Yeah, it's utterly eerie. I think I have been following a couple of historians on Twitter for some time now, including Heather Cox Richardson, who takes the Daily News and puts it in a historical context every single day, which as a history geek, I love. And one of the phrases that I keep thinking about that they use a lot is history echoes, but also history rhymes. So I think sometimes when you're a historical novelist and you put out a book, it happens to chime with a particular chord in history, and Universe of Two is doing that right now. All the World War II books are, I think, and World War II novels, as readers know, have been enormously popular in the last couple of years. And I think it speaks to the fact that it was a time when the United States was actually united fighting a common enemy. And right now, I think we're trying to find our way back to that. I hope we're trying to find our way back to that. And speaking of history, one of our readers, Tori Whitaker, who's also a friend and a fellow writer, whose first book is coming out in October, and it will be on the Blaze Historical Fiction also.
Wait, what's the name of her book? Let's say the name of it.
It's The Last Wish of Millicent Glenn. And I better have gotten that right because I worked on that book and I love the book. So if I got the title wrong, oh my God. Tori wanted to know how Japanese readers are responding. Is it too early to ask that? Do you have a sense of that?
It is. Unfortunately, this book does not have, I have other books that have Japanese translation. This book does not. And it's only been out for 2 days. So I haven't heard back from any Japanese people. I have heard from some people who have not read the book, who believe that I am saying the bomb was good, or that I'm condemning the people who worked on the bomb. And I encourage them to read the book before they argue with me. And I've had one mathematician who really wants to speak with me, and I'm terrified.
Run.
Because I tried so hard to get the math right, and I way oversimplified it. And I mean, I think I'm going to be in over my head in about 2 sentences of conversation.
Say it's fiction. It's fiction. Like it says a novel right on the cover. That has been my cloak for years. My cloak for years and years. I just made that part up. Reviews are so fab. As a writer, you talk about people sort of writing to you to review your book without reading it. Do you read your own reviews?
Sparingly. There's the preface to Dorian Gray, which Oscar Wilde wrote, has a page or so about criticism and reviews. And there are a few things in there that I just hold on to. He says criticism, among other things, he says criticism is the lowest form of autobiography. And right. And so I keep that in mind when I read criticism, especially favorable criticism. Can't trust that either. Right. They also say when his critics disagree, the artist is in accord with himself. So if somebody loves one aspect of a book and somebody else hates it, then you probably got it about right. So I hate to admit it, but I think a lot of my interest in reviews is somewhat mercenary. Will readers be drawn to this book because they hear good things about it? It's not, oh, he hurt my feelings because he didn't like my story. I mean, I wrote editorials for 14 years. Somebody hated me every day. You get a thick hide about that sort of thing, I used to have a direct thing on my phone. You want to cancel your subscription? I'll put you right through the circulation. Somebody's mad every day. But on the other hand, like the reader matters enormously to me. And so if somebody writes to me, and once I got a letter from a guy as a hummingbird, I'll never forget it. This guy who said, I just read your book and I'm so disappointed. Oof, exactly. Yeah, it's like, oh, buddy, let me rewrite it for you. I mean, I really listened to his concerns a lot. And even that was kind of autobiographical, but I took it to heart. Like, I really want to give the reader the best book I can. This book was hard. I told you that. It took me twice as long as it usually does. But just trying to do like the best you can. And if a review sees that, wonderful. And if a review doesn't like you, they can go write a book themselves. They can go write their own atomic bomb book.
And there are so many
Cry.
out there to choose from. And cry. I think it's such a tell when people write to you very angrily about a book. Usually the angriest emails that I get about my novels speak to me directly to the pain that reader is feeling about that particular topic. If
Yes.
somebody is saying like, you really misrepresented men. And there's a woman who wrote to me about a rape in my first novel that was perpetuated by an American soldier against my German heroine. And everybody behaves badly at the end of a war. Like, there are very few like legit golden heroes at that point with untarnished consciences. And she said, "How dare you lambaste the U.S. Army this way? Nobody would ever do this." And I always write back to my readers, and I wrote back to her as well to say, "I'm sorry, this it touched such a tender nerve in you, but this is why I wrote it this way. I think that war spoils even the best intentioned people, and that's the whole point of the book." And it turned out, of course, that her dad had fought in the U.S. infantry and was responsible for liberating Dachau, and so she couldn't stand to think of her father in any sort of morally compromising position. I think that sort of looking at the pain that people are writing to you about sometimes open those doors to walk through. But of course, I greatly, vastly prefer all of my good reviews. And there is, you mentioned something mercenary about reading your own reviews. They are a barometer of people enjoying your book, but also readers. If you like a book and you write a review anywhere on Amazon or Goodreads, it boosts the book in the search engine and it helps make a book successful. So readers really are acting as Tinkerbell there, or acting as the audience, keeping Tinkerbell alive. Like, when you write a review, you're clapping your hands and keeping that book alive. So please do that for the books that you love, including Universe of Two. So we have a time check here of 4:45. And obviously, like, we've been talking for 2 years, so we could talk for another 2 years about all the things, like all the writer things. But I have a couple more questions for you. And one of them is about love. Like, let's talk about love. You're
Okay.
like, I can't hear you. I'm going into the tunnel.
Love. Let's
Bring
speak about love.
Let's talk about love. You're blushing, man. I bought the sass. So tell me about the love story in this book, and tell me about, there's such a tenderness that runs through the novel that I think is an essential counterbalance to the permanent feeling of ominousness that is occasioned by the building of the atom bomb. Like, the reader knows something the characters don't know, but we also see this love story unfolding. Can you talk to us about how you came to the story? Did you plan it out? Did it unfold organically? And I'm breaking an interviewer rule of asking 3 questions at once, but what was it like to write a love story from the point of view of a woman?
Okay, I'm gonna save that one because
I'm gonna pin you down now.
Was that? No, we can come back to it. I just don't want to lose track. So what I will tell you is that my favorite thing about the book, my favorite thing is the love story, and one component of the love story, and I didn't have it at the beginning when I first started. So I mentioned there are 2 narrative voices, right? And one of them has a security clearance, and that's with Charlie. And the other one is Brenda telling the story, but she's not telling the story in a contemporary way. She's remembering the story. And so there is all kinds of nostalgia and appreciation and regret and all of those things that she has as an older woman living in an assisted living place, remembering those days. Charlie and Brenda, for example, have what I think of as one of the great first dates of all time. And it starts out badly and it gets worse and then it's terrific. And at the end of it, she doesn't talk about the kiss goodnight. She says, there is a day in which you have your last kiss with someone you love, and you never know when it's going to be. And now I would give up a month of my life to have 15 seconds of that first date back. And that poignancy, that desire in her, that longing in her, I think is actually the emotional core of the book. And I didn't have it at the beginning. And what happened is there was a scene where she's sitting on the stairs and Charlie is working at her father's workbench in the basement. And she goes upstairs to have her mother do the dishes. And I showed that to a friend, and my friend said, no, no, no. She stays down there and talks to him. And I had her go back downstairs and stay there with him. And suddenly she was missing her dad, who was off in the war effort. And here's this guy sort of in her dad's seat, doing sort of the stuff her dad does, and she's missing her dad. And it was like, oh, she's actually about longing. She's actually, and I never do this. I stopped and went back to the beginning. I never do that. I like to get first draft done and figure it out. I went back to the beginning. No, she remembers. And so now the book begins with her saying, here's the second sentence is everything that happens in her life with Charlie in one sentence, because like she has that perspective. And that's a way that made the love kind of not melancholy, but fully appreciated. There's no moment taken for granted. There are times when she's a young girl, she's 19, she does something dumb, and now she says, I would shake that girl. I should have kissed him in that moment, not argued with him, like that perspective. We will, in fact, all have a last kiss with everyone we love. And damn it.
Well, you better do a lot of kissing before that then to make it
No,
work. Do you think people can appreciate love in the moment?
absolutely. Haven't you appreciated love in the moment?
Never.
Never.
No, I'm totally kidding.
Yeah,
Every
yeah.
once in a while, I think one of the greatest gifts of being alive is when you realize that you're happy in the moment, like when you are actually happy, and you have to be sort of cognizant of the need to do that. And it's usually some really simple time, right? But
Yeah.
I think that Brenda taking the long view in the novel of the love that she has for Charlie, she also is present in the short view, the telescoping of time in the novel. There are times within the scenes when she has great admiration and respect for Charlie, and other times when she doesn't. And so one of the things I enjoyed in the novel is a sort of emotional chess game that she's playing with him and with herself of trying to figure out where does this guy fit into her life. And so I think it lends a richness to the novel, a chord to the novel. Speaking of, organs and chords and organs, there's a lot in this novel. There's a lot in it. Writing from a woman's perspective. I'm Trey interested to hear.
Okay, well, the first thing is, I think that a lot of you heard me say some of this on A Thoughtful Bro with Mark, just the other day, another lovely component of A Mighty Blaze that people should check out, Thoughtful Bro. But I feel like a lot of the notions and possibilities, narrative possibilities of male heroism have been very, very fully explored in Western literature for the last 2,000 years. And that the models of female heroism there's so much of a range that this is fascinating to me. And so all of my novels have strong female characters, and in some cases narrators. The Hummingbird is a female narrator all the way through. So there is a question of craft, right? You have to use language, metaphor. You have to be very careful about those fundamentals. But really, any narrator is an act of imagination. And the measure isn't gender. I have a narrator who's a cell scientist in The Curiosity. I have a narrator who was born in 1870, right? I mean, it's all about, do you convey it well enough that the reader forgets that they are reading a book, and they just have the story, the dream, whatever, the movie happening in their imagination? Do you give them the components for that? And I do that. I think I'm able to do that because I have immense respect for the reader and the caliber of the reader's imagination. And so I just, and I should add that all of my early draft readers, my agent, my editor, my publicist, my marketing director, all female, all strong women. They would not hesitate to tell me if I had something that clanged, that rang false. They have told me, they've saved me. Sometimes they point out a sentence and I go, oh, like I just completely cringe at what I wrote. But mostly it's like, I'm thinking about, will the reader believe? And can I help the reader to believe? And will the reader imagine? And that's true for any narrator, including a 19-year-old girl in 1944. Did you ever see that guy? I can't think of his name now, but he's bushy, great actor. bushy white hair and a mustache. He plays Mark Twain, Hal Holbrook. Yeah, I watched him perform where he was like 50. He was pretending he was Mark Twain at age 80, imitating Huck Finn at age 14. Right? How did he do that in all those layers? You know, he was somehow the craft. He was able to have us imagine an 80-year-old man pretending to be 14. Right? It was so many, and so either you believe it and go there or you don't. For any narrator, whether it's the cell scientist or it's Brenda in 1944, who wants to play cheek to cheek on the piano, on the keyboard, and he's saying, no, how about some Chopin? How about something slow so I can look at your beautiful face?
Did you like writing from I find it such a relief to get out of my own skin when I'm writing, honestly. And the characters I have the most trouble with are the ones who are most like me when I'm trying to, graft other characteristics onto a character who's more essentially like me. That's kind of a drag, I mean, I think that all of writing fiction is like Victor Victoria. You're like a, woman pretending to be a man, pretending to be a woman. You're a person pretending to be another person, pretending to be a true thing. So it's an interesting sort of prismatic reflection of a truth through a fiction. But I loved writing my male characters. And people say, do you have a hard time writing male characters? No, I fucking love writing male characters because you get to get out of the skin that you're in,
yes,
into another creature's skin. I am, however, cognizant of the fact that I'm not actually male. And, like ball buster, like whatever, but, but I enjoyed the challenge of trying to imagine what it would be like to be housed in a testosterone driven body as opposed to a driven body. And there were some differences. Did you find that challenging? Did you find it refreshing?
I thought that there were times where I didn't know. There were moments, for example, where Brenda goes into her bedroom. And I thought, what is a 19-year-old girl's bedroom in her parents' house like in 1944? I have no idea. And I was very, very careful when I find, like, it wasn't when she was having an argument with Charlie or there's this other guy that's interested in her and, she's kissing him. I wasn't like, it wasn't in those moments. It was much more like, what's her bedroom like? I have no idea. She's dressing to go to a dance. Oh man, am I out of my depth here? And so I would get very, very careful, and not try and make too much happen there. Just get her to the dance. And in fact, what I did in her room was she wrapped herself in a quilt that her grandmother had made for her when she was born. And that became like, and then that ended up being something that she put on Charlie when he fell asleep later. And so there were all kinds of symbolic things that occurred there, but it was because I was chicken to write like what was on the walls of her room, what kind of bed she had. I just had no idea, what kind of hairbrush. I just wouldn't know. So
I don't know. You can always ask me for a small fee. I will.
Yeah, well, were you 19 in 1944 though?
Yes, I was. Yes, I have time travel too. Yeah,
you look great. I mean,
I know. I'm very well preserved. I actually, every once in a while, you have readers who are, thank you. So do you, Jane. Everybody on this call looks freaking amazing.
We really do.
And it's not because we use the touch up your appearance button on Zoom, which is a thing.
I didn't even know that existed.
Exists truly?
Oh, you don't know about this? Oh, come on. Our associate producer is saying, what?
Yes. How come
I'll tell you guys all about this also for a small fee. And anytime you're writing historical fiction as a woman, ask me, I will tell you all the things. I can sort of project into that. But I mean, all writing is an act of imaginative empathy. I think you're totally right about that. And if we're lucky, we have readers who participate in that leap of imagination with us into other people's skins and experiences. And I hope it makes us all more empathic. So if you had one bottom line message for readers to walk away from Universe of Two with, I know that you had talked with Mark Cecil, our thoughtful bro, who's amazing. He just started his own author series. So it's gonna be 2 every Tuesday. You should check this out because it's hot. 2 on Tuesday. Anyway, so Mark had asked you, when you finish a book, like what is the feeling you want people to have, and you said that certain books just ruined you emotionally when you were done, which I thought was a great answer. When I finish a book that moves me intensely, I say thank you to it. Like I really do. And sometimes I kiss it. Like I am that book geek. Yeah. When readers close the covers of Universe of Two and they finished and they've hugged it and kissed it and said thank you, in addition to feeling emotionally sort of shipwrecked and missing those characters and missing the experience of being in the book, is there a message that you have that the book is trying to convey?
There's a message that the characters have, yes, and it's delivered in like the second to last paragraph. But for me, it's about it is about conscience, and it is about how we all fail our consciences at sometimes, and that how little loving kindness can help us to transcend that. And if we really are willing to look at our consciences, we're capable of doing great things. And that's what I think that's what their story tells. And they were semi based on actual people, and so like it's a conceivable thing. And yes, and I also just wanted to be an emotional experience where somebody reads the last sentence and their heart is full, and they're going to be thinking about it and feeling it for a while. That's just the hope and that's almost like the entertainment part of it. But I want them to just like stay through all of the credits at the end, stay until the lights come up, because they just want to remain in that movie that they just made for themselves and their imagination right till the very last minute.
So we want to make sure that all of you who are watching right now, and anyone who does watch, can pick up this book so you can have that amazing experience, and the afterglow and the aftermath. So you can get Universe of Two along with Jenna's books, The Lost Family, and others, Those Who Save Us, Storm Chasers, all of Stephen's books, the names of which I cannot remember right now. Hummingbird. Oh, hey, I love it. I love it. Mutual book plug. You can get those at bookshop.org, which is a Mighty Blaze partner. Stephen, we forgot to ask you, do you have an indie bookstore that you want to put in a plug for?
Oh, I would get in trouble because there are a bunch of them that really help me a lot.
Sure.
In your neighborhood next week, I'll be at Unlikely Story, and Jenna will be giving me completely different questions then. And I think Monday. And so that's the place I'd plug for sure. But the indies have been really, really good to me all over. So I have 50 favorites,
Yeah. It's like choosing between your children. So.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you both so much. This has been awesome. I've loved watching you. There wasn't much fighting. I mean, maybe next time there could be more fighting. So, but that's
on Monday at An Unlikely Story. I'm going to punch Stephen right in the face.
awesome.
Okay.
It's going to
Great.
All right. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you all.
Bye, everybody. Thank you. Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye, Blazers. Bye.
Bye.